Here's the two approaches that I use. They work pretty good. I call these field formulas. Certainly, there are a lot of formulas. A lot of them are very correctly done. They show a valuation of a business. But here's what I found works as far as just street smart valuation that I found works pretty well. One value is the percentage of gross sales, 50 to 60% of gross sales. Remember, we said sales drive value. So whatever the sales are, 50 to 60% of that's a ballpark value of that business. So if you got $1 million sample sales, you're looking at a business value of somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000, obviously depending on a lot of other input. Additional way of approach to value is a multiple of earnings. And usually 2 to 2.5 times the multiple of earnings is another approach to value. And so if your earnings say at $200,000, your business will be worth between $400,000 and $500,000. You add those two things together and divide them by 2, and guess what? That's a pretty good range of value on almost any business because it's based on gross sales and earnings, with both of which are important factors in the value of that business. If it's something you like and feel you could run and make a living for you and your family. All right. Make an offer when you're arriving at price, terms, and conditions. Here's another factor that I found is universal, you might say. Americans are not good negotiators. We're terrible at negotiating. We either pay the price or we don't buy something. When you think of this, when you check out a Home Depot or Lowe's or grocery store or something like that, zip, 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 they run the thing through the scanner. That's the price, that's the cost, that's what you value, that's what you pay for it. You don't check out the grocery store and the bill comes up $130. You say, hey, would you take $85 cash for these groceries? Of course not. That's not the way we do business. We either pay the price or we don't buy it. That's one of the reasons that when they take a test about what folks don't like about buying an automobile, guess what number one always is? The hassle of negotiations. Americans don't like to negotiate. But in buying a business, to some extent, you have to negotiate. And the reason is there's just so many inabsolutes in our business. There's just not a cookie cutter that this is what works here and all across the country and things there. Because it's the human element of negotiations and buying, selling a business going to be critical to that. And that's why I always say, let's try to build a relationship between the buyer and the seller first. Then let's see if we can put a deal together that might work. When you are looking at, you've looked at a business and you feel like it's something that might work for you, the asking price, not surprisingly, might be more than you think the business is worth right at first. Don't be afraid to make an offer. New Americans, I call it, folks that have come in from overseas, the Middle East, Orient, India, they are masters at negotiations. They never stop negotiating. So they look at an asking price, summarily dismiss it, and make an offer based on what works for them. I think you need to do that a little bit as a good American, with even our culture doesn't go well with negotiations. Make an offer that works for you, perhaps with a $1,000 refundable deposit with the broker, and offer a price that you're comfortable with, subject to due diligence. Everything is subject that protects you all the way through the process. Offer a down payment that you can write a check for, and ask the seller to finance the balance. And we may end up having financed it through a bank or through SBA guarantee. We're not sure yet, but right now, it would be X number of dollars down that you could deposit and ask them to finance the balance. You got to have enough money for your down payment and the working capital right at first. One of the biggest values about an existing business that should be already cash flowing. So you ought to be able to take payroll right out of that business the next week after you bought it because it's been paying payroll out for the last 15 years. Other terms and conditions balance to the seller, usually for 7 to 10 years at a reasonable interest rate. Right now, we usually do about 5% interest, even though the market is a little bit higher than that. We're not a bank. We put a deal together between the buyer and the seller. We want it to work for both of them. So about a 5% interest, and then see what they negotiate, what comes back with from that. But I will tell you this, price is probably more important to the seller. Terms and conditions are more important to the buyer. In other words, I'll pay you this much for this hardware store, if you take $100,000 down, then I can afford to put a down payment, and you'll finance the other $300,000 for 10 years, 5%. All right, so terms and conditions actually make it work for the buyer, but price is oftentimes more critical to the seller. All right, Brendan, thank you. See what the seller responds to in writing. And the reason I say in writing, let's take the personal, I don't like face-to-face negotiations. Sit down with the broker and draw up an offer that you're comfortable with, contingent on your full review and approval of the financials, contingent on your approval of the lease, contingent on your approval of the training and transition period for new management, contingent on the level of inventory, contingent on being able to get acceptable financing. All of those contingencies protect you all the way through the process. If we can't get it to work from your standpoint, we can always withdraw the offer. But see what the seller responds to in writing, then you know what your targets have to be while you're trying to get financing and doing due diligence. Seller may always want more down payment. They want as much as they can get. You can only pay so much. So buyer either have to borrow some more or get more from a third party. Seller may want to shorten the payroll period, the payoff period. Well, we take a look at that. We might could do a balloon payment, a lower monthly payment for 5 years, and then a balloon or something like that. All deal points are subject to negotiations. In small business, in the real world, everything is negotiable. So if you see you like something you like, see if you can work with the broker to put a deal together that makes sense for you and your family, as well as the seller. Thank you, Brendan. In financing the deal structure, oftentimes we'll hit a battle we call a third. A third is provided by the buyer, down payment. A third provided by the bank, SBA loans, traditional banking loans. And a third provided by the seller, which is seller financing. Most every transaction we do have some component of seller financing. And a successful ratio of down payment to annual earnings, here's what I try to shoot for in between the buyer and the seller. If you can put down $60,000 and make $60,000 a year in the business care and debt service, that's a pretty good, that's 100% return on your money. You can put down 80,000 and make 80,000, put down 150, make 150. That's what I call a down payment ratio, or 1-to-1 with the earnings of the business. That should be a workable situation, both for you and the seller. And as I said earlier, price is often more important to the seller. Term conditions more important to the buyer. The buyer needs cash and working capital to make things work out with a down payment. And most of our buyers have $50,000 to $150,000 that they can put down on a business. All right, thank you, Ben. Now due diligence begins. Engage a CPA to help verify the financial information. Don't expect him to advise you to buy a business, because I can tell you in 40 years of selling businesses, I've never had an accountant, not once, advise anybody to buy a business. They may give you good information, give you suggestions and things, but they're not going to professionally recommend you make the acquisition. That puts them responsible for that decision. It's your decision. Verify earnings, looking at tax returns, P&L, bank statements. Sometimes we just work with the seller for a while after we contract to verify the information he's given us. Verify any in-place contracts and obligations and customer mix. And verify an acceptable lease transfer, industry non-compete, and training and transition period for new management. Verify normal level of inventory. We want to take the business over prepared to open up and do business the next day after we close on it. Should have the normal level of inventory in there. Make sure that all equipment's in working order, and close the purchase and take over ownership. This last little thing, we'll close out with that just as a quick demonstration on taxes. This is business I sold 3 or 4 times in Charleston. It was a discount beer and wine business several years ago. But it's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to show you. It did a little over $1 million in sales, but it lost for tax purposes $6,500. This business actually made the owner over $100,000 on that. And what this is a LLC tax structure with sub-S tax structure. The owner of the business was running absentee. It was an all cash business, a substantial cash business. She had two employees, unfortunately, were taking money from her, and she ended up having them arrested. Actually, so we were able to prove that they had taken one kid had taken about almost $20,000 from her over years, and another one about 10. I had a son that worked there and didn't really work there, paid him $100 a week, and sometimes he worked there, sometimes not. She had a Corvette automobile that the business was making for her, about $400 a month. And the son had a CJ7 Jeep, but he drove it, and he had the raw words of the business on the side of the Jeep. But it's his Jeep. He used it to go to school. And he had depreciation of about $12,000, which is a non-cost cash item, non-cash. So we added that back, and the interest we added back because the buyer would have a different financial structure from that. Any amortization, if it was over, to add back nominally, and depreciation. And so, in taking those items there on this tax return, showed the salary to the owner, $36,000. She was the only officer of in the business. And then I added back $5,200 for the son, who didn't really work there. It was just a family income, additional income. Depreciation of about $12,000, $4,000 a year for the automobile she was driving, about $3,700 for the one he was driving. Both of those provided by the business, and added back the money that was proven to have stolen from her out of the cash flow. And last year she was in business because of that upside down situation. She paid over $10,000 in non-sufficient fund charges, bank charges. Never sent back one of her checks, but you charge that. You add those expenses back up. That business was doing $100,000 plus family benefit income to her, you might say, but she was paying taxes on $24,000 because it was a $30,000 income to her, less $6,500 loss for tax purposes. She was paying taxes on $24,000 a year, and that business was providing her and her family a lifestyle of well over $100,000. So what we need to do is get the right information and complete information step by step through the process, so that we can make sure if we find a business that we like, it'll make us a living just like it's making a living for the seller if we buy it right and if we protect ourselves all the way through the process.